Hi, my name is Tristan Lindell. I am a senior at West Lutheran High School in Plymouth, Minnesota, and I did my candidate study report on Amy Klobuchar. So I'm starting off with her background. She is 59 years old, and she was born on May 25th, 1960 in Plymouth, Minnesota. She attended Wyzetta High School, where she graduated as her class's valedictorian. No surprise there. She attended Yale University, where she earned her BA and graduated magna cum laude, or with great distinction. She's married to John Bessler, a Minnesota lawyer, and they've been married since 1993, and they have one daughter, Abigail Bessler. During her time at Yale, she interned for Walter Mondale, who actually was the vice president of President Jimmy Carter from 1977 to 1981. After that, she served as a partner at two notable Minneapolis Twin Cities law firms, Dorsey and Whitney and Gray Plant Moody. In 1998, Klobuchar was elected Hennepin County Attorney, the largest prosecutor's office in Minnesota. She held this office from 1998 to 2006 before running for Senate in 2006. Onto her political experience, she was first elected to the U.S. Senate in 2006, and she was actually the first woman from Minnesota to ever become a senator, which is pretty cool. She was reelected in both 2012 and 2018, winning over 60% of votes in both elections, and she announced her campaign for the Democratic presidential nomination in February of last year, 2019. Professional development. She has served and headed a plethora of committees. In 2014, she was elected head of the Senate Democratic Steering and Outreach Committee, and she is a ranking member of the Senate Rules Committee and the Judiciary Committee. And she has many other committee memberships, including but not limited to the Joint Economic Committee, the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee, and the Senate Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee. And it should definitely be noted that a senator is only obligated to serve on at least one committee and subcommittee, but her resume is not nearly this minimalistic. Obviously, she's on so many other committees. And obviously, she has plenty of accomplishments over her tenure as a senator and just in being in politics in general. Due to the great amount of legislation and change that she has fostered, she has received and been nominated for many awards. She received the Leadership Award for Mothers Against Drunk Driving, as well as awards from the National Farm Bureau and National Farmers Union. For her work to protect refugee families, she received the Congressional Leadership Award from Refugee International, as well as the Outstanding Member of the Senate Award from the National Narcotic Officers Association's Coalition. She also received the Above and Beyond Award from Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve. Lastly, she has written two books, Uncovering the Dome, which was about the politics behind the building of the Metrodome, and The Senator Next Door, a memoir from the Heartland. And obviously, this list doesn't even include all of the bills she's passed or helped pass as senator, which I'll cover a little bit later. She obviously holds or has held and continues to hold the office of United States Senator for the state of Minnesota. She's held this since 2006, as mentioned, and she served 3 terms. And the duties of a senator include reviewing federal officials, and obviously in the Kavanaugh hearings, as most of you are probably aware of, Klobuchar herself had an extensive role in this, and she was even able to personally question him at one point. Confirming federal officials, fulfilling duties on various committees, as mentioned earlier, attending meetings, proposing bills and legislation, writing and editing bills and legislation, and advocating for or against bills and legislation on the Senate floor, and voting for or against the passing of a bill. And obviously, as a senator, you probably have to attend a lot of social functions and meetings and dinners and meetings with citizens, and you obviously have to act as a constituent of one state, so you need to represent that state above all else. And Klobuchar certainly does that. Some more accomplishments. She has helped pass a multitude of bills and laws in her 13 years as a senator. Interestingly, and this caught me quite by surprise, she has passed 3 farm bills, including the bipartisan 2018 Farm Bill. During the Obama administration, Klobuchar helped pass the FAST Act, which was a major bipartisan transportation bill. And she also saw that adequate funding was obtained to rebuild the I-35W bridge after its tragic collapse in 2007. That was just terrible. She achieved $380 million, to strengthen states' election infrastructure, basically protecting them from interference from foreign entities. Obviously, that's been a pretty big deal in recent years with elections and whatnot. She passed legislation against opioids and human trafficking, and wrote legislation for a policy to have eligible voters automatically registered upon their 18th birthday. Klobuchar has seen 33 bills passed during her tenure in the U.S. Senate, first among Democratic candidates, including longtime Senators Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. And while these were all during her senatorial career, she was also able to make a difference before her time as a senator. She helped pass the first felony DWI law in Minnesota, and earned national awards as the Hennepin County Attorney from the Clinton and Bush administrations. She's obviously a member of the Democratic Party. Moving on to her hot-button issues, she has so many goals and ambitions, perhaps more than anyone on the Democratic ticket. She hopes to protect families and consumers by lowering costs of amenities such as prescription drugs and healthcare. She is also leading the fight against big business and corporate mergers, and she shows her commitment to Minnesota by looking out for rural America, evident in the farm-related bills that she's passed. And she also hopes to strengthen infrastructure through public works and a strong nationwide broadband connection. Obviously, a long list of goals and ambitions. She has many strengths, obviously. These include her drive to see change through legislation, her commitment to bipartisanship, her resume, and her hospitable and pragmatic personality. She is obviously committed to create changes in this nation, which is evident through all the legislation and bills that she's passed under her tenure. And the same would probably be true if she won the presidency. She has been championed for her bipartisanship, as many of her bills have been passed through interaction and compromise with Republicans. And she obviously has a strong resume as a senator, and her Midwestern roots are evident in her interactions with others. She does have a couple weaknesses, and these unfortunately include her gender and lack of political experience outside of the Senate. Now, I don't mean to say that she's less of a politician for being a woman. Obviously, that is wrong. Most would agree that discriminating against a politician due to gender is irrational and wrong, but there are still those who definitely cannot envision a female president. Furthermore, Klobuchar has certainly been in politics for quite a while and has a good amount of experience, but she has served only in the Senate and has never run for president until now. In contrast, leading Democratic candidate Joe Biden has served 2 terms as vice president, obviously to Barack Obama, and Bernie Sanders has presidential campaign experience. On to my thoughts about Amy Klobuchar. I selected her because I'm a Minnesotan, and I've always heard the name Amy Klobuchar from time to time, but I never knew much about her prior to my research. Her views and career as a senator, knowledge of that was limited at best for me personally. I thought that researching her campaign would be a good opportunity to better inform myself of her political career, as well as the current Democratic nomination, as I've seen a lot in the news, but I haven't really been following it too much, so it was really good to catch up on that. I considered researching more highly touted candidates such as Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, but I reasoned that researching Klobuchar would be more relevant to me personally, because even if she doesn't win the nomination, I'll still know more about our foremost Minnesotan senator. Her top 3 issues were really difficult to pick. I mentioned all of her goals and ambitions earlier, and those weren't all of them, to be completely honest. She still has many more. But if I had to choose, her top 3 priorities would consist of protecting families, ensuring free and affordable health care, and targeting corporate America. Klobuchar's commitment to American families has been clear throughout her entire political career. As mentioned, she has a desire to make healthcare more affordable and to secure Medicare for all, which would, of course, benefit many families. She also hopes to lower costs for everyday goods and services, putting all consumers first. She clearly empathizes with American mothers, as her political career began because of the birth of her daughter. This is actually quite an interesting story. After giving birth to Abigail, she was forced to leave the hospital after 24 hours, despite the clear health issues of her newborn daughter. After testifying in favor of extending the hospital stay of new mothers, a law ensuring a 48-hour hospital stay was eventually passed in both Minnesota and the United States, and this was actually how she got started on her political career. Like most Democrats, Klobuchar hopes to ensure free healthcare for all, The U.S. does not yet have a program of universal health care, but perhaps this will change if she wins the Democratic nomination or if another Democrat is elected president. And lastly, she is very much against corporate America and big business, and she hopes to raise the corporate income tax that was lowered by the Trump administration. And she certainly empathizes with consumers, hoping to lower everyday costs for everyday people. And regarding whether these issues are important to me or not, I tend to avoid considering hot-button issues that divide many Americans. I wish I thought about politics more, but I just don't. I often can't come to a decision, as I come from a conservative background, yet live in an increasingly liberal society. And Klobuchar's first priority is definitely something I tend to agree with. Cheapened products and healthcare would certainly be beneficial, and I would love to see the betterment of families across America. But I don't necessarily agree with the means to achieve such things. I understand the taxation of large corporations, but I don't believe that wealthy Americans should necessarily have to suffer through increased income taxes, or at least not to the extent that most Democrats suggest. Likewise, I firmly believe that healthcare should be free, but I question how far America might stray from concepts of capitalism and social mobility in order to achieve this. All people deserve a guarantee of health, but only if the resources to ensure it are not coming from the pockets of those who have justifiably earned their money. And lastly, while I myself hope to find a career in business one day, I support Klobuchar in her efforts against corporate America, and there are far too many examples of common people suffering at the hands of big business. And I think her campaign is rather reasonable. All of her ambitions are supported by bills that she has passed, and she's clearly committed to change, unlike some presidents that have occupied the Oval Office. While writing legislation in the Senate is not exactly the same as causing change as a president, as there's a lot of stipulations and restrictions, it's reasonable to assume that Klobuchar isn't making any empty promises, or at least not many. Hopefully not. I also greatly admire her views on bipartisanship, as dialogues between political parties seem few and far between in today's day and age. In addition, all of her goals have common people like myself in mind. And regarding her website, I think it's pretty well done. I do wish that it was slightly more informative of her political background, but it's definitely informative enough to form an understanding of Amy and her campaign, but concise enough for the casual reader. And it asks a browser to contribute to her campaign, but it doesn't make anyone feel overly compelled to give, and it's not a requirement to view the content on the website or anything like that. In addition, it is organized rather well and is easy to navigate. And do I think if she would beat Trump, if she were to win the Democratic nomination, which is a big if, I honestly don't see it happening in the current stages. But if that were to happen, I definitely think that she could defeat Trump in the 2020 election. Hillary Clinton was able to win the popular vote against Trump, only narrowly losing in the Electoral College. She certainly had a complicated and controversial history, a lot of emails and things like that. But she was able to put up a very respectable fight. And Klobuchar has no such history, and definitely, in my opinion, a more influential political background and a reasonable campaign. And I do think that a lot of hatred toward Donald Trump is misplaced. There's definitely no shortage of it. And I believe this, coupled with Klobuchar's campaign, would be enough for her to win against him. And if she were to win, I do think that she would be successful. Obviously, this comes from a biased perspective, as I've kind of researched a lot, especially on her website, and I haven't seen quite as many contrary points of view. But her strong political resume and lengthy political background make it easy enough to come to this conclusion. And I truly believe that she is committed to fostering change in this country. And views on success are obviously subjective due to differing views on politics. But her focus on bipartisanship and the American people is something that anyone can definitely get behind, whether conservative or liberal or Democrat or Republican. There are obviously factors that are beyond her control, such as the party control of Congress. On to my closing thoughts. As I mentioned earlier, I come from a conservative background and a pretty Republican family, and I definitely approached my research regarding Amy Klobuchar with some initial presumptions and biases, but most of those have dissipated. I do believe that she places the general welfare of America above all else. She seems committed to bipartisan change, which I greatly respect due to many political divisions. In addition, due to the Midwestern roots that I share with her, I find myself agreeing with some of her policies, including her affinity for agriculture. While I do not think that she will win the Democratic nomination, especially due to the results of the current primaries, I think that she is deserving of it, and she is unarguably capable of winning in the future.